When the sun rises over the quiet hills of Hudson, it no longer feels like a promise, it feels like a warning. Heartland, the ranch that once echoed with laughter and the sound of horses running free, now stands on the edge of silence. The fences are worn, the barns are empty, and the people who once held this place together are falling apart. But in the middle of all that loss and fear, one woman refuses to let it all slip away. Lou Fleming, the one who always carried more than she should, is about to do something no one expects. She's not just fighting for Heartland. She's fighting for its soul. The wind swept across the open fields, carrying the smell of dust and hay through the air. Heartland looked the same from the outside, but something inside it had changed. The laughter that once rolled across the ranch was gone, replaced by the quiet sounds of whirring. The horses still ran, but they seemed restless, as if they too could feel the unease that hung over the land. Lou stood by the paddock, her hands tucked deep into her jacket pockets, staring at the fences that needed fixing. It wasn't just the wood that was breaking, it was everything. Bills piled up on the kitchen table. The feed supplier had stopped calling and started sending warnings instead. The bank wanted answers that Lou didn't have. Every time she walked into the house, she could feel the weight pressing down on her shoulders. Jack tried to keep things steady, but age was catching up to him. Amy spent more time away, caught between her grief and her horses. Tim was out chasing new dreams, leaving the ranch to survive on memories and muscle. It was Lou who kept trying to hold it all together, even when it felt impossible. She would wake before sunrise and walk the ranch, not because she had to, but because she couldn't sleep. The quiet mornings were the hardest. The light creeping over the hills reminded her of what this place used to be, her mother's laughter, Amy's first horse, Ty fixing the old barn. All of it played like an old film in her mind. She could still hear her mother's voice saying, "No matter how bad things get, Lou, Heartland will always be our home." But now, even home felt fragile. Amy had stopped coming to family dinners. Jack's stories had grown shorter. Even Lisa's smile carried a hint of sadness. The ranch had always been more than just a business. It was a place where broken hearts came to heal. But lately, it seemed like no one knew how to fix it. Lou felt trapped between duty and despair, wondering if she was strong enough to keep her family's dream alive. The worst part was the letter from the bank. It had come 2 weeks ago, sealed in a plain white envelope, looking innocent until she opened it. The numbers didn't lie, they were running out of time. Unless she found a way to bring in new income, they could lose part of the land. The thought of someone else owning even a single acre of Heartland made her sick. She had fought too hard for too long to let that happen. That night, as she sat by the kitchen window, she looked out at the stars and whispered, "I can't let it end like this." The moonlight washed over the fields, silver and soft, and for a moment, she thought she saw her mother's shadow in the distance, near the barn. It was only a trick of the light, but it gave her something she hadn't felt in a while: hope. Lou wasn't the kind of woman who gave up easily. She had faced storms, heartbreak, and failure before, but this felt different. This was about legacy. This was about keeping the promise her mother had made, the one that lived in every corner of the ranch. She didn't know how yet, but deep down, she knew one thing: she would find a way to save Heartland. The next morning, she stood at the front porch as the first light of day touched the hills. The air was cold, her breath visible, but her resolve was firm. The world might see Heartland as just another ranch, but to Lou, it was her family's heartbeat. And she wasn't ready to let it stop. The morning light slipped through the thin curtains, painting soft gold lines across the wooden floor. Lou sat at the edge of her bed, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The world outside was waking up, roosters crowing, horses snorting in the cold air, a new day beginning. But inside her, everything felt still, heavy. She had always believed that hard work could fix anything. That if she just kept moving, kept planning, kept pushing forward, things would eventually fall into place. But lately, even that belief was beginning to crack. There was something haunting about silence at Heartland now. It used to bring peace, the kind of quiet that felt alive, full of possibility. Now it just reminded her of everything she had lost. She could still picture Amy walking out to the stables, Ty at her side, laughing about something simple, something small. Those memories had once given her strength. Now they felt like ghosts, beautiful but painful to touch. Lou walked to the window and looked out at the ranch. The land stretched out endlessly, still beautiful, still wild, but there was an emptiness that scared her. The fences were splintering, the paint was peeling, and the barns looked tired. But it wasn't the buildings that worried her most, it was the people. Amy had lost her spark, Jack was slowing down, and the family dinners that used to fill the house with noise were now quiet, filled with half-spoken words and uneasy glances. Lou felt like the last thread holding everything together, and it was beginning to fray. Her reflection in the glass looked older than she remembered, not in years, but in weight. The kind of weariness that comes from carrying more than your share of the world. She whispered to her reflection, "You have to find a way." It was something she'd been saying to herself for weeks, but the words were starting to sound hollow. That afternoon, she tried to distract herself with chores. She fixed a loose latch on the stable door, brushed one of the mares, and reorganized the feed room. But no matter what she did, her mind wouldn't quiet down. Every sound, the creak of wood, the crunch of gravel under her boots, seemed to echo with the same message. Time is running out. At one point, Lou found herself in the old barn, the one her mother used to keep spotless, no matter how busy she was. The dust floated in the sunlight like tiny ghosts, and the air smelled of hay and memories. She ran her fingers along the old wooden beams and whispered, "Mom, what would you do?" For a moment, it felt like she could almost hear Marian's voice answering, steady, kind, certain. Her mother had always known what to do, even when everything seemed impossible. Lou wished she could borrow that strength just for a little while, but the truth was, Lou wasn't just fighting for a ranch. She was fighting for her sense of purpose. For years, she had defined herself by her role, the responsible one, the fixer, the planner. When everyone else broke down, Lou was the one who stayed standing. But what happens when even the strong one starts to bend? The thought scared her. As the day faded, Lou sat on the porch steps, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue, and the first stars began to appear. Jack's old dog, Remy, wandered over and rested her head on Lou's knee. Lou smiled faintly and scratched behind her ears. "You're the only one who still listens, huh?" She murmured. Somewhere inside, something began to shift. It wasn't a clear idea yet, not even a plan, just a spark. A memory of something Ty had once said, "You can't fix the world, Lou, but you can make one corner of it better." Maybe that was the answer. Maybe Heartland didn't need to go back to what it used to be. Maybe it needed to become something new, something that could still heal in a different way. That night, as the house grew quiet, Lou couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, ideas spinning in her mind, half-formed but alive. A new purpose. A new beginning. If she could find a way to turn Heartland into a place that helped others, maybe veterans, maybe kids who needed a second chance, then maybe it could survive. Maybe her family could find their light again too. She got up, pulled on her sweater, and went downstairs. The kitchen was dim except for the glow from the lamp by the window. On the table were stacks of unpaid bills and faded photographs. Lou pushed the papers aside and found an old notebook. The cover was cracked and worn, but the pages were still blank. She took a deep breath, opened to the first page, and began to write. At the top. She wrote just 3 words, "Heartland can heal." She didn't know what the plan would look like yet, or how she would make it happen. But for the first time in months, she felt something stronger than fear, purpose. The night was still and cold, but Lou's heart was warm again. Somewhere in the darkness outside, the horses stirred, and the wind carried through the open fields like a whisper of hope. Lou didn't smile often these days, but as she closed the notebook, she did. It was small, tired, but real. Tomorrow would bring more problems, more doubt. She knew that. But tonight, she had one thing she hadn't felt in a long time, a beginning. The morning sun spilled over the hills like honey, soft and golden, warming the frost that clung to the fences. Lou stood by the porch, her notebook in hand, its pages fluttering in the breeze. She had barely slept, but her eyes were bright with something new, a quiet determination. The world around her hadn't changed, but inside her, something had. For the first time in months, she wasn't waking up with fear in her chest. She was waking up with purpose. The plan that had begun as a late-night thought now pulsed in her veins like fire. Heartland could heal not just horses, but people too. Lou looked out across the fields. The horses were restless, their breath clouding in the cool air. They were creatures of instinct. They could feel the weight of the humans around them. Maybe, she whispered to herself, it's time we all learned how to breathe again. She tucked the notebook under her arm and headed to Maggie's diner, where she had asked Lisa and Tim to meet her. She needed their help, and more than that, she needed their faith. Inside the diner, the smell of coffee and fried eggs filled the air. It was the kind of place where small-town gossip mixed with laughter and comfort. Lou slid into a booth by the window, her heart racing. Tim was already there, leaning back with his arms crossed, his expression skeptical as always. Lisa sat across from him, elegant but kind-eyed, her curiosity clear. You said it was important, Tim muttered, his voice rough from early mornings and too much black coffee. What's going on, Lou? Lou opened the notebook slowly, her fingers trembling slightly. Heartland is in trouble, she began, her voice steady but low. You both know that. The ranch is drowning in bills, and the bank isn't going to wait forever. But maybe there's a way to save it, not by going back, but by going forward. She turned the notebook around so they could see her notes. I've been thinking about what Heartland really is. It's never just been a ranch. It's a place where broken things get fixed. Horses, people, families. What if we made that our future? Lisa leaned forward, her eyes soft. What do you mean, dear? Lou smiled faintly, her words coming faster now. A rehabilitation and equine therapy center. For veterans, for kids, for anyone who needs healing. We already have the land, the horses, and the history. All we need is to build a program around it. It could bring in funding, sponsorships, community support, maybe even grants. We could turn Heartland into a place that heals more than just our family. Tim frowned, scratching his chin. You're talking about changing everything. Running a therapy center isn't like running a ranch, Lou. It's expensive, complicated, and what about Amy? You think she's just going to agree to this? The mention of Amy's name made Lou hesitate. She looked down at her notes, her voice softening. I know it won't be easy. Amy's been through so much, and I don't want to push her. But I also know what Ty wanted. He wanted to help people, to give others a second chance. This could be how we honor him. This could be how we keep his spirit alive. For a moment, no one spoke. The clatter of dishes and the low hum of the diner filled the silence. Lou's heart thumped in her chest. Then Lisa reached across the table, her hand warm and firm on Lou's. I think it's a beautiful idea, she said softly. Heartland has always been a place of healing. Maybe this is exactly what it's meant to become, Tim sighed, leaning back with a small shake of his head. You've got guts, I'll give you that. But guts don't pay bills. Lou's voice hardened slightly. No, but giving up doesn't either. I'm tired of watching this family drift apart. I'm tired of seeing the place Mom loved fall apart piece by piece. If we're going to fight, we might as well fight for something that matters. Tim didn't answer, but his expression softened. He had seen that look in Lou's eyes before, the one she got when she refused to back down. Finally, he nodded. All right, he said quietly. If you really think you can make this work, I'll back you. But you better be ready for a storm. Lou's lips curved into a small, grateful smile. I've lived through worse. When they left the diner, the cold wind whipped across the street, but Lou felt warm inside. The plan was no longer just an idea in a notebook, it was real. It had a pulse. There would be obstacles ahead. She knew that. Amy would need convincing, and the money would be hard to find. But for the first time in a long while, Lou wasn't walking away from the fight. She was walking toward it. That night, she spread her notes across the kitchen table, drawing lines and lists, ideas and timelines. The table that had once been covered in bills was now covered in blueprints for hope. As she worked, she could hear the faint sound of horses outside, their hoofs striking the ground in rhythm. It felt like music, like the ranch itself was starting to wake up again. Lou looked up at the photograph of her mother hanging on the wall. Marian's smile seemed to shine a little brighter in the lamplight. "We're going to save it, Mom," Lou whispered. "Heartland's not done yet." And somewhere deep in her chest, she felt it, the spark turning into a flame. The following days felt like riding a wild horse, fast, unpredictable, and dangerously close to collapse. Lou's plan had filled her with fire, but the reality of what stood in her way was colder than the November wind sweeping across the Heartland fields. Each morning began with the same routine, a coffee gone cold before she finished it, papers scattered across the kitchen table, her notebook filling with new ideas and unanswered questions. It all looked good on paper, but ideas didn't fix fences or pay bills. And dreams, she was learning, came with their own kind of weight. Amy was the first wall she hit. Lou found her in the barn one morning, brushing Spartan in quiet rhythm. The smell of hay hung in the air, and the morning light caught the streaks of dust floating around them. "You've been busy," Amy said without looking up. Her tone wasn't angry, but it wasn't warm either. It carried the tired edge of someone who'd lost too much to believe in hope easily. "I've been working on something," Lou began carefully. "Something that could help Heartland. Maybe even help us all." Amy paused, her hand stilling on Spartan's neck. "Help us how?" Lou hesitated. She had practiced this speech 100 times, but standing there, facing Amy's distant eyes, every word felt fragile. "I want to open Heartland as an equine therapy and rehabilitation center for people who need healing. Kids, veterans, families. We'd still do training and boarding, but this would be bigger. It would give Heartland purpose again." Amy turned, her eyes flashing with disbelief. "So you want to turn our home into a business? Into some kind of project?" Lou's stomach tightened. "No, not a business, a legacy. Something Mom would be proud of. Something Ty would have believed in." The mention of Ty's name changed the air. Amy's shoulders stiffened, her breath caught. She set the brush down and looked away. "Don't use Ty to sell your plans, Lou," she said quietly, her voice breaking just a little. "You don't understand what this place means right now. It's all I have left of him. I can't just watch it turn into something else." Lou wanted to argue, to explain that this wasn't about changing Heartland, but saving it. But she saw the pain in Amy's face, the wall of grief she wasn't ready to climb. So she said nothing. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy, until Amy finally walked away, leaving Lou standing in the dust with her notebook clutched against her chest. That night, Lou sat in her office with the lamp casting long shadows on the walls. The numbers didn't lie. They were running out of time. Even with Lisa's support and Tim's reluctant backing, they needed funding, permits, staff, and community trust. It was too much for one person to handle, and though she tried to tell herself she wasn't alone, it often felt like she flipped through her notebook, reading her own words, "Heartland can heal." It sounded naive now, too simple for a world that had grown so complicated. She wondered if she was just chasing ghosts, trying to build something that no longer belonged to them. Maybe Amy was right. Maybe Heartland was supposed to fade, like the end of a story everyone had already told. But as she sat there, the house quiet around her, a faint noise broke her thoughts. Jack's boots on the wooden floor. He appeared in the doorway, leaning on his cane, his weathered face half lit by the lamp. "You're still up," he said softly. Lou smiled weakly. "Couldn't sleep. Too much running through my head." Jack stepped closer, looking at the papers scattered across the desk. "I heard about your plan." "Amy's not too happy." Lou sighed. "I know. I thought it could work, Jack. I thought maybe it was what we needed. Jack nodded slowly, pulling up a chair beside her. You've got your mother's fire, Lou, and her stubbornness. That's a blessing and a curse. He smiled faintly, the lines around his eyes deepening. Change is hard for folks like us, especially for Amy. She's lost more than anyone should. But don't doubt yourself, kiddo. Heartland's been through worse, and it's still standing. Maybe it's time we let it grow into something new. The words hit Lou like a breath of fresh air. It wasn't full approval, but it was hope. And from Jack, that was everything. She nodded, blinking away tears. Thanks, Grandpa. He stood, patting her shoulder. Don't thank me yet. You've got a long road ahead. But I've seen what happens when a Fleming woman makes up her mind. Just don't lose yourself along the way. When he left, the room felt warmer somehow. Lou looked back at her notes and took a deep breath. The doubt was still there, heavy and sharp, but beneath it, a spark of faith glowed again. She wasn't sure how she'd convince Amy, or how she'd raise the money, or how the town would react. But she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't give up outside. The wind howled across the fields, rattling the windows. The world was dark and uncertain. But Heartland had always been built on faith, the kind that lives quietly in the soul, waiting for someone brave enough to believe in it again. And that night, Lou decided that someone would be her dot as she closed her notebook and turned off the light. The moon shone through the window, silver and soft. It fell across the old family photo on